Gard Express are Australia's leading mail ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Gard Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show, you jump online and visit their website.
Hello everyone.
Oi.
Welcome to another episode of the Garden Gurus Facebook Live. I'm Darren Seno and it's great to be here. I've been filling in for Trevor for the last couple of weeks while he's been away overseas. I've had a lot of fun, but this is my final week. So I'm looking forward to seeing all your questions, seeing your garden pictures and hopefully getting to help you out. Remember, for my favourite question of the day, there will be a $50 voucher for Gard Express. So make sure you get your questions in, comment on the Facebook feed. If it's a really good question, you could end up with a $50 voucher to Gard Express. So that's really worthwhile. So talking of plants from Gard Express, the Coprosma. Now the Coprosma is a great group of plants and the Pacific range is probably the absolute best of them. They're bred in Europe, but they're absolutely perfect for Australian gardens. Full range of colours, growth habits and varieties, really tough hardy plants, pest and disease free, will grow anywhere from the coast to the mountains, to the hills, wherever you live in Australia, you'll have no problems growing the Coprosmas. So this week's special for Garden Gurus viewers only lets you choose between the Pacific Sunrise or the Pacific Sunset, two fantastic varieties, 180ml pots for $24.90, which is a great deal. So probably might as well get a couple of each. So here's Simon to tell you a little bit more about these fantastic plants.
Pacific was actually bred in Europe, but they are perfect for Australian conditions. They are really drought hardy, and look at the beautiful foliage on these two new varieties, the Sunset Reds and the Sunrise Pinks, absolutely stunning. This foliage is definitely a feature in its own right.
And this week we've got a super special deal for Garden Guru viewers thanks to our friends at Garden Express. You can get your hands on the Pacific Coprosma in 140ml pots. Normally they'd be $19.90, but for Garden Guru viewers just $14.90. It's a 25% saving. Now these plants will not last. They will sell out quick, so get in fast.
Well, those Coprosmas actually speak for themselves. They're a fantastic hedging plant, low maintenance, easy to grow, and for $24.90 each 180ml pots, that's an absolute bargain. Now, before we jump into the questions, we had a comment from Jeannie. She thanked me for advice on the blue ginger. Anytime, Jeannie, that's not a problem whatsoever. She had it in the gardens for a few years, been a little bit neglected, but still survived. So after the show last week, she decided to dig it up, put it in a pot with some new potting mix and place it where it'll get a little more care, which is what the blue gingers do like. Had a bit of scale, so she sprayed it with eco oil and will continue to nurture it. Well done, Jeannie. That plant will thrive. You won't see a lot of growth or a lot of new foliage on it until the warm weather, but keep it somewhere where it's nice and warm, a little on the dry side over winter. As soon as we get into some beautiful warm spring weather, that blue ginger will take off, put out some new growth. And by the start of autumn next year, you'll have flowers everywhere. So well done. And that'll be a feature in your garden for a long time to come. Now, kicking off the questions, Jeanette Luscombe in Mansfield, Victoria, sent us a photo of her Daphne. And her Daphne's not looking great. So, Jeanette, there could be a couple of things going on with that Daphne. Firstly, the potting mix. Daphnes are pretty fussy. They like a really acidic potting mix. Normally, we'd go with an azalea camellia potting mix, absolutely ideal for Daphnes, and they need good drainage. The limp foliage to me suggests the potting mix is either maybe a tiny bit alkaline, or either it's not draining particularly well, and that Daphne is suffering from a little bit of root rot. It's a classic reason for failure in Daphnes is root rot. So just check the potting mix, do a pH test on it, see where the pH sits. If it's too alkaline, you may need to take it out of that pot, get some azalea camellia potting mix and repot it. I'd also spray it with some Yates anti-rot. Give it a couple of sprays about 10 days apart. So if there is a little bit of root rot going on in the root system of that Daphne, it will recover pretty quickly. So good luck with that. That Daphne, that Princess Pink variety in particular, is a beautiful garden plant, fantastic in pots, and that winter perfume is just to die for. Now, Brett Cook has some Sir Walter Buffalo that is looking really yellow. He's tried to fertilise it and wants to know, is that unusual for this time of the year and what to do about it to make it greener? Well, Brett, depends a little bit where you're growing that buffalo. At this time of the year, as the nights and the mornings get cooler, buffalo can lose a bit of its colour, particularly if it's in shade and particularly if those areas are staying damp, so they're not getting a chance to dry out during the day because it's in shade and the overnight dew settling on the grass. The best way to green that up is a liquid fertiliser. So if you go to your local garden centre, your local hardware store, you'll be able to buy an iron-based liquid fertiliser. There's a lot available. Mix them up in a spray pack, spray it onto the foliage, let it dry on the foliage before you run your irrigation, and that will help green it up. If it's particularly yellow, it may take a couple of applications, maybe even 3, to get it as green as you would like. Now, Christine Rankin has an underperforming Magnolia Little Gem. That's no good, Christine. It's planted in the front garden, gets regularly watered, but has not grown at all. She thinks it might be pH related, wants to know is acidic soil best. She's feeling the pH is a little too alkaline. Well, Christine, you're right on the money there. With the Magnolia, the Little Gem varieties and all those evergreen Magnolias, they do prefer slightly acidic soil. They like soil with a good lot of organic material in it, free draining soil. But if it is a little high on the pH scale, if it is a little bit alkaline, that will definitely stunt the growth of the Magnolia. So what you could do, firstly do a pH test so you know what you've got to work with. Then get yourself a few bags of really good quality, fully mature compost. Put that around the root system of the Magnolia. You can scratch it in lightly if the soil is friable enough for you to do that, and add some controlled release fertiliser. For the Magnolias, I find Troforte is a really good option. So put the Troforte, the compost, seaweed solution in a watering can, water it all in really well, and then mulch it. Hopefully once we get into spring this year, that Magnolia will start to grow for you. But it really does sound like it's a soil problem. Getting some organic material, some compost into the soil will make a world of difference. Wendy Brown on the central coast of New South Wales has a standard weeping camellia in full bloom, but the buds are going brown before opening and they're falling off. She's fertilising with Troforte. The weeping magnolias, or camellias, and all the camellias, again, they do prefer acidic soil. Looking at your picture, your plant looks healthy. So I first and foremost see where that pH is sitting. For camellias, you want it about 5 to 5.5. They will do pretty well with a neutral pH around 7, but as soon as you get above 7, they do tend to struggle. And one of the ways they display that struggle is by having the flower buds fall off before they open. So check the soil. Also make sure it's staying moist between waterings. If the plant is drying out between waterings, as with a lot of plants, not just camellias, they'll abort the flowers and drop the buds before they get a chance to open. So check your soil pH and check your soil moisture and take it from there. Now, Chrissy in Perth has 4 standard Kalamata olives in big pots and wants to know, can you make them not fruit and just be ornamental? Well, you can, Chrissy, if you don't want the fruit. And I understand some people with their olive trees like the trees, beautiful evergreen trees, silver grey foliage, super hardy, great trees for Perth. They do particularly well over here. But the fruit can be a bit messy. Birds get into it. You end up with stains over your paving and cars. So I can understand why you may not want the fruit. If you want to minimise or make sure you don't get almost no fruit at all, the best way to do that is wait till you see them in full flower. As soon as the flowers are completely out on the plant, give them a prune. Just prune the trees all the way over. Try and take all those flowers off, and you will remove any opportunity for the plant to produce fruit. They bounce back from the prune very quickly. Flowering time is generally in late spring, early summer. So if you give them a light prune there just to take those flowers off, give the trees a light fertiliser as well. And being in tubs, I would also apply a wetting agent, just to knowing what olive root systems are like. Wetting agent in the pots makes a big difference. By removing those flowers, you'll end up with an ornamental olive that never fruits. The other option is there are a couple of non-fruiting olive varieties. There's one called Swan Hill. Can be a little bit hard to find, but has virtually no fruit whatsoever. So Keith Rodrigo in Moorebank in New South Wales has managed to grow a Lighty plant from seed. Well done, Keith. Now that winter's coming, do I put it in a pot and keep it indoors? Well, I don't know about indoors, Keith. Indoors can be a bit dodgy for the lychee trees to really do well. I'd be trying to find a nice warm part of your around your house, on the patio or a porch, where the winter sun really gets into, and had somewhere for the heat to build up. So like concrete path, concrete paving, brick walks, so that heat can be absorbed during the day and then stop the plant from getting so cold at night. You may also want to rig up a little temporary plastic house over winter, so you can get some horticultural plastic, some sort of framework, maybe some rigid polypipe that you can put over the lychee tree and just try and hold the humidity and a bit of that warmth in around it overnight. It's the winter's the hardest time for lychee trees when they're outside of their tropical zones. So just trying to make sure they're not getting so cold, and keep it a little on the dry side as well. That will make a big difference too. So Patricia Bonham wants to separate a large monsteria that's growing out, who's outgrowing her villa, looking for the best practice. Well, with the monsterias, Patricia, can't really go too far wrong. So you can cut some pieces up, you can cut some different sections out of the plant. Anywhere there's a leaf node, you'll see roots starting to form. Those pieces can be taken and replanted, put into pots, put into other parts of the garden, given away to friends. You can cut that monsteria back as hard as you like. Probably not right now. I'd leave that till spring to do the really hard cutback, unless you just want to get rid of some of the bulk of the plant now. But if you're looking to do a really hard cutback, maybe wait till spring. You can cut it back as hard as you like, then give it a fertilize and some mulch and compost, and it'll just boom back with plenty of fresh growth. But you really can't go too far wrong with the monsterias as far as where you cut them back. They've got so many growth points, they'll just shoot away, and all those pieces can be used for propagating if you wish. Rena Callis in Sydney wants to buy an orange tree and grow it in a pot, and wants to know what's the best kind of orange tree for a pot and when to plant. Well, I'd be planting that right now. If I was you, Rena, I'd go out and buy one this weekend. And my favourite variety of orange to go in a tub or a pot is a variety called Navelina. Not surprisingly, it's a variety of navel orange. So it still has those great big, beautiful, juicy, flavoursome navel fruit, but it's a naturally smaller growing navel tree. You can get pretty much all the other varieties of oranges, including the Washington navel, including all the blood oranges, on semi-dwarf rootstock, and they would make a great option as well for planting in pots. Oranges are pretty easy to grow in tubs. Just use a really good quality premium potting mix. Fertilizing needs to be more regularly, smaller amounts more regularly, and just make sure that pot doesn't dry out during the hot months. But other than that, you should have no problems growing a beautiful orange tree and getting plenty of fruit. Now, Anne Bond has problems with her malacope tree. Malacopes are a rainforest tree from northern New South Wales, southeast Queensland. The picture that Anne has sent through doesn't look too promising. That tree looks like it's just about at death's door, unfortunately, Anne. So being a rainforest tree, they like high humidity, they like rich, well-drained soil. So lots of organic material, even a little bit of clay into the soil will help. They do like the soil to drain freely though. Grass looks like it's very close to the trunk of the tree. So you can try cutting that grass back, cut a circle up to 1 metre away from that trunk, so you can really improve the soil around it with plenty of compost, some well-aged animal manure, some controlled release fertiliser, some good quality mulch around it. Just thin it out as you get closer to the trunk. Make sure it's not drying out. Rainforest trees are used to a lot of moisture in the air and in the soil. So have a look at all those things. See if you do a little scratch on the bark, see if it's still green underneath, because if it's gone brown, particularly down towards the soil level, it's probably not going to come back. Otherwise, improve the soil, make sure the soil's draining freely but still staying moist, and then fingers crossed you'll see some growth in that tree in early spring. Trixie Willow in Thornley is watching it on YouTube because she doesn't stream FB. So YouTube's another great option for watching Facebook Live, for watching the Garden Gurus Facebook Live. So it's one Trixie's taken up. They're FIFO workers, wants to know what the best plant to grow in their veggie garden that doesn't need daily attention. It will be fine with 2 days a week on their retic watering roster. Well, Trixie, there's a couple of options you can do. Depends on how much space you've got. Probably the easiest vegetable you can grow in your garden that requires the least care, certainly doesn't require daily attention is the sweet potato. So there's a lot of varieties of sweet potatoes available now. So you can get the purple flesh, the white flesh, the orange flesh ones. They will take over a fair bit of space, and they're a perennial plant, so they'll be there for a very long time. So if you've got a garden bed that you're quite happy to put over to one variety of vegetable, the sweet potato is a great option. This time of year, you can grow a lot of your leafy greens, so your English spinach and your rainbow chards, Swiss chards, they can be grown. And given that the weather is starting to cool down, there's promise of rain coming eventually, that they can be grown without having too much daily care. They're not overly concerned by pest or diseases, and your 2-day-a-week watering roster that we have in Perth will keep them growing and keep them really well. Just make sure the soil you're growing them in is really nice and improved. It's got plenty of organic material in there and nice and free draining. Those vegetables will do really well, and they will, when you come back from your FIFO shift, they'll be there ready for you to harvest. Jeanette from Mansfield has also got a philodendron xanadu that's been inside the front window. So she was removing some yellow leaves off it this morning and found some brown bugs around the base of the leaf. Now, those brown bugs, Jeanette, are a form of scale, so they're one of the brown scales. Very common on philodendrons, particularly when they're grown as indoor plants or in really shady areas. You will see a bit of scale up. If you can take those plants outdoors, give them a really good water so you can wash out all the potting mix, wash all the fertiliser build-up that would have been in the pots from being indoors so long. Wash all the dust off the foliage, and then you can spray them with white oil or pest oil or any of the horticultural oils. And neem oil do the same job. So make sure you thoroughly cover the leaves top and bottom and get right into the crown of that philodendron with the spray. They will smother out the scale and stop them from multiplying, and eventually they will dry up and fall off. You'll need to do at least 2 sprays, about 7 to 10 days apart. Once you've done the sprays are dried off, you feel like your scale's under control, then you can take them back indoors again. Now, a lot of people have sent us in photos this week, which is fantastic. Photos are so helpful, makes it much, much easier to diagnose what the problem with the plant is or even identify the plant. So we have now a little clip to show you how to send your photos in to get the best results and to get some really great information on your plant problems.
Gardening question you'd like us to answer and you need to send us a photo, we'll simply head to our Facebook page and click on message. Type out your question and click the camera icon to take a photo in the app. Or click the image option and select the image you want to send us. Be sure to allow Facebook access to your camera and camera roll. We check our messages regularly, so sit back and be sure to tune in to the Garden Gurus Facebook Live show every Friday, and you'll hear your answer.
Now, it's my favourite time of the whole show. It's plant of the week. So what I've bought in this week, I've had 2 really big showy plants. I've bought an absolute little sweetie in today. This is a coria. It's called Canberra Bells. There's lots of different varieties, cultivated varieties of corias, and there's corias that are endemic and native to just about every state of Australia. If you live in any part of Australia, there's probably a native endemic coria that grows in your local area. Now, the absolute feature of the corias is their flowers. You can see on this little Canberra Bells, these beautiful bicolour flowers, a little bit of a yellow sort of bell with a pinky throat. Now, the flowers on the corias vary in colour a lot. So you get some that are nice creamy whites, right through to a range of pinks, reds, and quite dark reds as well. And then a lot of bicolours. So you get ones with more than one colour on it at once. Corias grow a really big range of growth habits. So this little Canberra Bells will only get to 50 centimetres tall, 50 centimetres wide. And then there's other ones that will get to 1 metre tall and wide, 1.5 metres tall and wide, and just about every size in between. Very easy to grow plants. They like a open, sunny area, but will tolerate quite a lot of shade. Good rich soil, free draining soil. Do like some organic material, some compost mixed into the soil at planting time. And in summer, because they do have quite shallow roots, they do need to be mulched. So when you're mulching your native plants, a good open coarse mulch. If you really want that moisture, the rainfall, the irrigation water to move through the mulch very quickly and get into the soil and really support the corias. Only need to be fertilised twice a year, so you'd fertilise them in spring and then again in autumn. Once the flowering's finished, you can give them a light prune to keep them nice and tidy. Most of the coria species and varieties have naturally very tidy growth habits, so pruning is absolutely minimal. You pick up a plant like this in your local garden centre, somewhere between $15 to $20, and they're available pretty much all year. Plant them in autumn's the ideal time, so in most parts of Australia, autumn's the best time to plant your native plants, and corias will be in the garden centres. You'll have plenty to choose from, and you'll be able to find one that will fit in just about any spot in your garden. And something that shouldn't be ignored with corias and quite a few other native plants is their ability to grow in pots and look absolutely fantastic. Many of the corias have a naturally slightly weeping growth habit, so growing in a nice pot, maybe put up on a stand so you're really getting to display that growth habit. They'll give you flowers about 3 months of the year, and the foliage will look fantastic for the rest of the year. Corias naturally grow well with other native plants, so have a look where your variety or species originated from, and have a look at some of the other native plants that naturally grow in that area. So in Perth, I like to grow my corias with things like grevilleas, eucalypts, corymbias, any of those sort of plants. Hakeas do really well around corias, so they all grow well together. They have the same sort of watering requirements, same fertilizer requirements, and that makes gardening really, really easy. Back to the questions. So Denise Lister wants to know if mandevillas naturally die back in cooler weather, and should she cut hers one right back to keep it going. Well, Denise, they don't like the colder weather at all, so they are a tropical plant, and they tend to go off a little bit in winter. It depends on where they're growing, how much sun and how much warmth they're getting through those cooler months to how much they'll die off. It's not unusual to see them have a lot of yellow leaves during the cooler months, and they'll shed those leaves, and they can look a little bit thin and not at their absolute premium that we see in the warmer months. Definitely wouldn't be cutting your mandevilla back too hard at this time of the year. You can give it a light tidy up if you wish, but don't prune it back. Don't go too hard on those secateurs. Leave that till spring. Once we get through the cooler part of spring, those early few weeks of spring, we start to get into a little bit of warmer weather. There's some hot weather around the corner. Then you can go as hard as you like on the mandevillas. They will take a really hard prune if needed. Generally, though, you're just looking at it, tidying them up. It might take between sort of 10 and 20% of the foliage off. The great thing about mandevillas is they do flower on their new growth. So if you do need to cut them back hard, just to get them back in order, tidy them up, you can cut them back as hard as you like, feed them, they'll get new growth, and then towards the back end of summer, right through autumn, you'll start to see all those beautiful flowers. And one of the wonderful things about mandevillas now is they come in a huge range of colours: pinks, reds, whites, some bicolours, great plants, and they do fantastic in any warm, sunny spot, and they're very drought hardy as well. So they're a great choice for Australian gardens. Patricia Bonham in Bathurst wants to know if the plant of the day, so this, the little coria, if it's frost tolerant. She lives in Bathurst in New South Wales. The corias are reasonably frost tolerant. They prefer to be in frost-free areas, but they will take a light frost. If you get a really heavy frost, you might see some foliage damage. Generally, they'll recover from the frost burn in spring, but if you can find a frost-free area, that's where they'll grow their best. If you're in an area that does get frost, grow them in a pot, keep them up near the house where they're far less likely to be hit by frost. Brian Smith in Young in New South Wales loves the show and needs some advice. Has had a huge problem with fruit fly this year. I'm sure Brian's not the only one. It's one of the perennial problems for anyone growing particularly soft fruit. He sprayed regularly, has the fruit fly traps out, but the problem persists. Brian, fruit fly is a really difficult pest to control. They breed very quickly. They have a very short life cycle, just keep breeding up more and more of the pesky fruit fly. The only way you can really pretty much guarantee to protect your trees from fruit fly and have nice fruit fly free fruit is to net your trees. So you can buy at your garden centres, hardware stores, specialty netting stores will produce a fruit fly netting. So you need to get that on as soon as the tree has flowers have been pollinated. So as soon as those flowers, bees have been in, pollinated the flowers fall off and the fruit's just on the trees, that's when you need to net. You need to get the netting up, and you need to net the floor as well, because fruit fly overwinters in the soil. And if you just net down to the ground, but the ground's open underneath the netting, any of that fruit fly larvae that's overwintered in the soil will still get access to your tree and your fruit. If you do the netting practice and you make sure you have good hygiene around your fruit trees, so any fruit that falls on the ground, clean it up as soon as you can, solarize it if possible, or wrap it up in a plastic bag and put it into the bin. So anything that's possibly been stung by the fruit fly, you get rid of it and out of your fruit tree growing area straight away. And then you make sure you're netting consistently. As soon as those flowers are pollinated, you will get fruit fly free, and then eventually your fruit fly numbers will start to dissipate. The issue you may have, and what a lot of fruit growers have, is if their neighbours aren't controlling the fruit fly. So if you've got neighbours that are growing apricots and peaches and citrus trees, make sure they're doing the right thing as well. Maybe have a chat to them, and you can come up with a program between the two of you that you're keeping the fruit fly under control. So no point you doing all your hard work and your next door neighbour still breeding up plenty of fruit fly. Good luck with that, Brian. It's absolutely heartbreaking when you spend all of summer growing some beautiful stone fruit, for example, and then they end up full of fruit fly. Consula Gonzalez in Sydney. Good morning, Darren and team from the Garden Gurus. Well, good morning to you. I would like to know what vegetables I can plant in a garden with little sun. Very shady areas are the toughest areas for growing your veggies. I spoke about earlier in the show, I spoke about sweet potato. They will grow in fairly shady areas and be quite tolerant and still very productive in shady areas. Asparagus is another perennial long-term vegetable that will grow in shady areas as well and do very well. Buy the crowns in winter, plant them out. Once you get them established, you've got that asparagus plant there for at least 20 years. The other more traditional veggies that do quite well in reasonably shady areas are leafy greens and chards. So they will grow quite well and still produce plenty of foliage that you can put in your stir fries and soups and whatever, and be good value for money. Shady areas are the most difficult for growing vegetables, particularly in winter. So good luck with that. Caitlin out in Bullsbrook, her daughter loves bugs and butterflies, and she would like to encourage caterpillars into a garden. She wants the caterpillars, so she gets the butterflies. And so they come in and make cocoons. When is the best time of the year for this, and what's the best way to attract them into the garden? Well, Caitlin, if you want to attract butterflies and any other insect, pollinating insects, any sort of bugs at all, beetles, into your garden, you need to be growing flowering plants that attract those type of insects into your garden. So plenty of flowering plants, plenty of flowering herbs. Herbs are great attractors for insects, particularly if you're looking at butterflies. You can't go past the buddleia. It's called the butterfly bush because it's so attractive to a lot of butterflies. So I've got one in my garden, and quite often I'll go out during the year when it's in full flower and it'll be covered in monarch butterflies, which is a great thing to see. And I'm sure your daughter will really enjoy having that buddleia or a butterfly bush in the garden and seeing all those beautiful monarch butterflies coming in and making their homes in your garden. But pretty much if you're growing heaps of flowering plants, you can grow flowering annuals, herbs, all those sort of things that just produce lots and lots of flowers, and you'll get insects, bugs, caterpillars into your garden. Gary in Sutherland, New South Wales, his garden mulch is thinned out over summer and wants to know, should he top it up before winter or wait until spring, and wants to know what's the best mulch for native plants. Well, Gary, having the mulch thin out over summer is pretty normal. It's particularly if you're using organic mulches. The mulch tends to breaks down, returns organic material and carbon to the soil, which is a good thing. So that's improving the humus and the organic matter content into your garden soil. Generally, people think of mulch as a summer thing. So you're mulching your garden to slow down evaporation, keep the soil cool over summer. But mulch does far more than that. It is a protective layer for your soil. So it protects all your soil microbes, keeps your soil biota really healthy. So mulch is an essential part of gardening in most parts of the world, and I would definitely be mulching now and topping it up again over winter. So having the mulch out in the garden in winter has quite a few benefits, but one of the ones that's very much underrated is it prevents soil splash. So if you've got a good coarse mulch spread over your garden, so something like wood chips, spread over the garden, and during the rainy months, so all through winter when the rain's hitting yours, rather than hitting your soil and splashing mud and soil up the stems of your plants, which can help spread some fungal diseases and actually generate the perfect conditions for those fungal diseases. the rain's hitting the coarse mulch, so you're not getting soil splashed up the trunks of the plants. It's also good because it attracts the worms and just looks after your soil life. So I would definitely top the soil up now, leading into winter, and then you may need to do it again, probably in early to mid-spring, to just prepare your garden beds so they're ready for summer. Now, the weather is starting to cool down, but I don't know how it is in other states of Australia at the moment, but in Perth, it's very, very dry. If you're out in the garden doing some gardening this weekend, keep in mind that until we get regular autumn rains coming, regular winter rains, any new plantings do need to be kept well watered. You can't let them dry out. I know in Perth, we're in our gardens that we're looking after at the moment, we're using a reasonable amount of wetting agent, trying to get that water to move right into the soil profile and stay there around the plant roots and sustain them until we get some decent rain. So depending on what the weather's like in your part of Australia, you may need to consider a little bit of extra watering through autumn for any freshly planted plants, just to sustain them until we get to some good rain. I'll be really interested to hear how the rest of Australia is going rain-wise. I know we've had some parts have been very, very wet, but here in Perth, we've been, unfortunately, very, very dry. Now, Nancy Lee Harton has roses that are not flowering, hasn't seen flowers on them for 2 years, and is having to cut them back hard. Nancy, if your roses are out in full sun, getting plenty of sun, and they don't have too much root competition, roses hate root competition. So if you've got big trees, eucalypts or liquid ambers or something like that have very vigorous, hungry root system growing near them, that can really affect your roses as well. But if they're in full sun, not too much root competition, there's no real reason why those roses shouldn't flower. Maybe this year in winter, give them their hard winter prune, spray them with lime sulfur, fertilise them coming out of winter, and see how they go. Otherwise, probably if we could get some photos sent into the Facebook Live next week, and maybe Trevor can have a look and see if he can see anything. But without pictures, it's really hard to tell why they're not flowering, because roses, even on complete neglect, still manage to put out a few roses. The only issue I possibly think could be a problem is if your roses have reverted back to rootstock. So rather than having that really nice variety that's been budded onto rootstock growing and flowering, that part's died out of the plant for some reason, and you've got the rootstock growing. And the rootstock varieties only flower in spring. They have a very short flowering burst in spring, and then they're just foliage for the rest of the year. So you may need to have a look at that, have a look at the roses, see if the budded growth is still there. That's the only thing I could think of other than some conditions with too much shade and too much root competition. Mim Simpson wants to know how to keep animals away from her bananas without bagging them if the bunches are too high to reach. That's a $64,000 question, Mim. I'm trying to keep things like possums and rats away from bananas is very difficult. Bagging is the most effective way. You probably need to identify what animals are actually getting to the bananas. If it's possums, you need to put some barriers up to stop them be able to get to the tree and to climb up the tree. Can be quite difficult with bananas because they don't have that single trunk, but some sort of barrier to stop possums getting there. If they're rats, it comes down to having a look at a baiting and trapping routine, which I think is best handled by a licensed pest control agent. But that's the first thing you need to do. Identify what animals are getting to your bananas. Again, very disheartening when you spend full 12 months growing a beautiful banana tree, you see that beautiful banana bell come out, the fruit starts coming out, and then some other animals getting there and getting the best of your bananas before you do. Lynn Bowditch in Wonga Beach, North Queensland, wants to know why do full-grown palms rot at the base? So she's got a bottle palm, had a lot of rain by the sound of it in that part of northern Queensland. There's a couple of things that can happen to these palms, Lynn. One is if you are getting a lot of rain and there's no drainage. So the drainage isn't, the water's not getting a chance to drain away from the base of that palm. That can definitely cause rot. The other thing too is if you've got any sort of animals that are chewing on the base of the palm, and that opens that base up to rot as well. So you're getting the effect of the wound caused by an animal chewing at the base of the palm, and then the rot can get into it. So they're the two things I'd have a look at first, see if there's any signs of physical damage around the base of the palm, and try and improve the drainage. If you're having issues with drainage where you're getting a lot of rainfall, the water's sitting around the base of that palm, dig in some drainage ditches, so some trenches, fill it with a coarse aggregate, and see if you can channel some of that water away from the base of the palm. give the soil an opportunity to just dry out a little bit between the rain events, and hopefully your palms will either not get the rot in the first place or start to recover. Leanna in Southern River is keen on planting a few camellias for winter and spring flowers, but has never grown them before and wants to see if I've got any tips. Wants to know if some varieties are hardier than others. Well, Leanna, one of the easiest of the camellias to grow is definitely the sasanquas. So it's a whole species of camellias, commonly called the Japanese camellias. They're flowering now. They've just started in Perth. They flower right through autumn and into the start of winter. More of a shrubby growing camellia, very, very hardy. If you want to go for a hardy camellia, your first choice should be going for the sasanquas. The species that's most commonly grown and has the most spectacular flowers, in my opinion, is the japonicas. So there's literally tens of thousands of japonicas to choose from. They flower in a range of colours, from whites, pinks, right through to reds, and there's some that even have a little bit of a bluish tinge if you sort of look at them in the right light. And there are some amongst those japonica varieties that the hardiness and the vigour from one variety to another does vary a lot. So the varieties I would choose if I was growing camellia japonicas for the winter spring flowers, and I'm a first time grower of camellias, I'd look at a variety called Great Eastern. Very good grower, nice pinky red. Another variety called the Tsar, which is another sort of pinky red, but again, a very solid grower. And if you want a white, you can't go past Love Light. Love Light's a beautiful camellia japonica, classic single semi-double white flower with a big boss of golden yellow stamens, really nice foliage, just a spectacular garden plant. And it's probably the most foolproof of the white camellias. If you really want to just ease yourself into camellia growing, though, go with the sasanquas to start with. And then if you feel like you're having success with those, then try a few japonicas. And also remember, they do very well in pots. You can grow camellia japonicas, particularly in pots for many, many years, and they make fantastic potted specimens. Now, Greg in Hobart, not a very garden-related question apparently, but he has a huge ant problem. Well, Greg, ants in the garden is definitely a garden-related problem. So many gardeners having so many problems with ants. Wants to know their best advice for getting rid of the black ants because they bite and they hurt. I can definitely testify to that. They do hurt when they bite. Ants, generally, you find them in your garden if your soil is quite dry. So ants don't like to have their ants' nest being flooded and wet all the time, so they look for dry areas. So you can discourage ants from coming into your garden. So in those drier patches, using a wetting agent, even improving the soil with some compost and some other soil amendments that help the soil hold on to the moisture a bit better. But wetting agents are probably the best one to go for. So apply a wetting agent to those areas quite regularly, water it in, turn the soil over so the water can soak in, and that will discourage the ants. The other thing you can do, Greg, is if you can catch one of those ants, catch it on a piece of sticky tape. And if you go to your local ag department in Tasmania, either with a picture of the ant, some ag departments will let you send that sample of the ant in on the sticky tape. Get them to identify the ant, so they'll be able to tell you whether it's a native ant or whether it's an introduced species of ant. And if it's an introduced species, they will be able to tell you what's the best control mechanisms for those ants, whether it's a spray or a powder or what you need to do to control those ants. But actually identifying what species of ant it is, whether it's a native ant or whether it's an introduced ant, will give you a lot more information to how to control them and keep them away from the garden, and hopefully stop you from getting bitten by them, Greg, because it is not pleasant at all. Mim Simpson sent us another question in. She's got gall wasp in a citrus, wants to know how to control it. Well, Mim, gall wasp is a big problem, particularly here in Perth. It's the last 10 years or so, just about every citrus tree in Perth seems to have been attacked by gall wasp. You need to remove all the galls if possible. So you go through, cut all those galls out of the plant. Again, you can either solarize or freeze them. If there's not too many of them, put them in a plastic bag, put them in the freezer, and that will kill off the larvae that's inside the galls. You really do need to control them, and gall wasp has a very specific life cycle. The galls are set now, they're growing, and they'll burst out in early spring. So the young gall wasps will burst out of those galls in early spring, and they'll go around and infect other trees. So you need to remove them sooner rather than later, and either solarize them, or, as I said, if there's not too many of them, put them into a plastic bag and freeze them. Just don't whatever you do, don't simply cut them and drop them on the ground or put them in your compost heap, because those gall wasp larvae inside that gall will still have the opportunity to fully mature and burst out of those galls later in the year. Good luck with that, Mim. It's a bit of an issue with citrus growers in Perth at the moment, and it's one that we all need to sort of pull together as gardeners and citrus lovers and make sure we keep on top of it. Adrienne in Adelaide wants me to recommend a climber to grow over pergola, preferably deciduous. Well, deciduous is the best choice as far as I'm concerned for growing over pergolas. The beautiful thing about deciduous climbers growing over your pergola is they will give you that beautiful, cool summer shade that we really like. That's why we grow climbers over pergolas in the first place, for that shade. But then they'll drop all their leaves in autumn, and for winter, you'll be able to have all the winter sun coming through, hitting the paving and your garden furniture, so it's not staying wet and damp and dark and dank over winter. The best choice, in my opinion, is the ornamental grape. So you can buy your ornamental grapes normally in autumn, pretty readily available. They're basically a grapevine, same as the fruiting grapes, except they don't produce any fruit. The beauty for some people for having a grapevine that doesn't produce fruit is that you don't have to worry about pest control with the fruit, and you don't have to worry about attracting rats to your pergola, because rats love grapes. So the ornamental grape, fruitless grape, will grow beautifully in spring, produce plenty of foliage, beautiful dark green foliage that will give you that really cool summer shade that we're after. You'll get some beautiful autumn colour, so fiery tones of reds and purples in the foliage before they shed in autumn. And then in winter, all the leaves have shed off the vine. Great opportunity, you can get in there and cut that vine right back, take some of the mass out of it. Ornamental grapes, one of the fastest growing of the deciduous climbers too, so you can cut it back as hard as you like in winter to keep it under control. Let all that beautiful winter sun in, and then look forward to the spring growth. The other option that's worth considering would be wisteria. Wisterias are even faster growing than ornamental grapes, so they can be a bit of a maintenance issue because of how fast they grow, particularly if you don't have a huge pergola. If you've got a massive pergola, definitely look at the wisterias, and with the wisterias you get those beautiful weeping chains of spring flowers, and they have a very nice perfume as well. So a couple of options there, either the wisteria or the ornamental grape. My first choice is always the ornamental grape in that situation. Gary in South Guildford lives near the river, and therefore it's very swampy, and mosquitoes are a big issue. They seem to live in the soil. Wants advice to stop them laying their eggs in the soil. Gary, I'm very familiar with South Guildford and with the river areas and with the mosquitoes that live around there. They are an absolute menace. To be totally honest with you, Gary, that you've got a couple of things you need to do. Is one, try not to have any stagnant water sitting down around. So particularly coming out of winter into spring and early summer, because South Guildford has such clay soil, some of the winter rain, some of the water that's hit the ground will sit for quite some time. So just make sure there's no puddles that are sitting around. Try and drain them out back into the river if you can, or just fill them up with some sand or something, just so you don't have that stagnant water sitting around. And the other thing is you may need to get a pest controller in once a year or twice a year to spray to kill off those mosquito larvae. Otherwise you're just going to have a backyard full of mosquitoes right through summer, which, as we all know, is not very pleasant. Martin in Melbourne would like to start a herb garden, wants to know the best way, and can I recommend some favourite herbs to grow? And in brackets, he's put easy please with an exclamation mark. Well, Martin, the good news about herbs is most of them are pretty easy to grow. Winter, you can grow coriander. So coriander is not a fantastic performing herb during the warmer months, but it's great in winter. Far slower to bolt to seed in winter than it is in the warmer months. It's one of my favourite herbs. I love coriander, but I do know there's a lot of people that absolutely hate coriander. So that'll be a choice for you to make, Gary, if you like coriander or not. But you can also grow parsley very successful through the winter months. Even if you have a nice warm spot, if you've got a nice warm soak around your house, you can even try growing basil as well over winter, but it does tend to struggle a little bit unless you've got a particularly warm area. So parsley is the main go-to one. You can grow some of the chives, onion chives, garlic chives. You can grow those through winter successfully as well. But my number one winter herb is definitely the coriander. Emily in Queensland wants to know best plants to grow in sandy soil. Well, Emily, not knowing what part of Queensland you're from, what I would generally recommend for anyone with sandy soil is have a look at what's growing naturally, endemically in your area. So contact your local native plant society, find out what your local endemic native plants are, and choose from those, because they've evolved to grow in your native sandy soils and will do really well. You won't need to do much in the way of soil amendments, and they'll grow particularly well for you. Won't have your pest and disease problems, because again, they've evolved to do really well in your area. Now, there's only about 15 minutes or less left to go. So if you don't get your questions in pretty soon, you're going to miss out on the opportunity to win that $50 Gard Express voucher. And, if you get that $50, that'll get you a couple of those fantastic coprosmas that we saw early in the show. The coprosma plants, I think the work the breeders have done on some of these coprosmas, particularly these sunrise varieties, are particularly good. They're fantastic, compact, dense plants. If you're a bit of a lazy gardener, you don't want to do too much hedging, you definitely don't want to be dealing with pests and diseases, I would definitely have a look at some of these coprosmas. They are really tough, hardy, easy grow plants, and when you're growing them as a hedge, you don't need to do too much hedging for them, which is another fantastic aspect. You don't want to be out there on the hedge trimmer every week. Robin Quinn has sent in a couple of photos, lives in Canberra, just moved into a new house, has a huge block, so plenty of garden potential. There's nothing better than a huge block that you can get your teeth into, Robin, and get some new plants and gardens in there. Now, it has some roses that are growing, and they're certainly growing, and they look like they've been neglected for a while. So probably not much in the way of feeding, not much in the way of pruning for quite a while. Wants to do a tidy up. Bit worried about the frosts in winter if you prune them now. Look, Robin, what we try and do with our timing of our winter prune on the roses is you're trying to avoid a situation where you give them a prune and then they burst into new growth and then they get hit by frost, because that frost on that fresh new growth can be really damaging. It can really set your roses back, and instead of having a wonderful summer and autumn of beautiful rose flowers, they won't do quite as well. So given that Canberra is pretty renowned for quite heavy frosts, maybe talk to your neighbours if you've moved into the area and that you aren't really familiar with the frost cycle in your area. Talk to your neighbours, find out when those frosts really hit, and then you need to time your pruning around that issue. So although those plants look like they're actually crying out for a hard prune, might be an opportunity now just to give them a light prune, just to tidy them up so they're just not so massive, not so scraggly, and then wait and prune them probably late July, even early August, depending on when you can expect your frost. And then give them a really hard prune, spray them with your lime sulfur, do a bit of work on the soil. So I'd be mulching that soil with a layer of compost and then some a good coarse mulch over the top after the compost. And then hopefully what you'll find is you'll get some new growth starting to come out in early spring after the risk of that frost has passed. As I said, last thing you want to have happen, beautiful, fresh, soft, new growth all over your roses, and then you get hit with a really hard frost and they all get burnt off, and it really sets those roses back and sets the scene for not a great flowering period. So good luck with that. It looks like you've got a bit of work ahead of yourself, but make sure you use your neighbour, especially if you've got a neighbour that's been in the area for a while and can give you some really good information about when the frost comes in and what the seasons are generally like in that particular part of Canberra. Liam's asked, when's the best time to prune palm fronds so they don't get out of hand? Is it something he can do himself? Well, Liam, it's certainly something you can do yourself if you've got the right tools. So generally palm fronds are quite high on the palm, they're right up the top, right under the crown. Depends on how mature the palms are. But you can get yourself a pole pruner, so you can get a pruning tool with either like a secateurs blade at the end of it, a lopper blade, or you can get a chainsaw connection on top of the pole pruner. Always have to be very careful pruning overhead, because those palm fronds are generally a lot heavier than you'd expect. So if you're pruning them and dropping them and you're working underneath, definitely recommend getting a hard hat. You can buy a decent hard hat from your local hardware store for about $15. Very good investment. So be very careful when you're dropping those that they don't hit you on the top of the head. If you need to get up a ladder, you're adding a little bit of a risk factor there as well. Ladder falls are the biggest source of injury in home gardeners. So if you do need to get up a ladder, make sure you're not standing right on the top and you've got somebody holding the ladder for you. But you can prune those palm fronds off any time of the year. So as soon as the fronds are starting to droop and dropping and looking unsightly, you can prune them off whenever you want. Try and cut them back reasonably flush to the trunk so they look nice and neat and tidy. You don't end up with a little spur of a frond there that just browns off and looks awful over the long run. But it's definitely something you can do yourself. It's just the logistics of how high those palm fronds are. And make sure you take care while you do it, Liam. would hate to see you get an unfortunate palm-based injury. Now, June and Carafa, this is lots of flame trees where she lives. Love them all except when all the flowers fall off. Can they be used for mulch at all? Well, the flame trees do produce a lot of flower. That's absolutely true, particularly up in Carafa there. So look absolutely stunning when they're in flower. That fallen flowers, June, you can definitely use that as a mulch if you want to. Like, they form very similar soil improver like a leaf mold from deciduous trees will in the cooler parts of Australia. The other thing you can do with it is also compost it. So you can blend it with some dry material, maybe some dry leaves, shredded newspaper, shredded cardboard. You can mix that up in your compost heap with those flowers, and that will break down very quickly. Those flowers compost extremely rapidly, and you'll end up with a very good compost that you can put into the garden. Just make sure you keep that balance of wet and dry materials in that compost bin nice and even. Those flowers, as I'm sure you know well, June, are very wet and soggy when they hit the ground, so you need a bit of dry matter mixed in with them as well. Normally the flame tree leaves are on the ground as well. They'll go quite well in the compost heap with the flowers, but if not, shredded newspaper, shredded cardboard is a great way to add dry material into the compost heap. Now, Michael in Adelaide has the Japanese deciduous trees down a street. Mine always changes colours weeks before anyone else and wants to know why that is. So I'm presuming what Michael has is perhaps a Japanese maple. He's just got Japanese deciduous tree on the message. So we're going to go with Japanese maple. Michael, I hope we got that right. I used to find deciduous trees when I used to grow them as a wholesale plant grower, and we used to grow a lot of deciduous trees. If we had a batch of deciduous trees that didn't get enough TLC and maybe got a bit hungry in the pots or a little bit dry, they would colour up in autumn before everything else, just as a bit of a reaction to stress. So that could be the issue with your tree, and why it's colouring up. It may be getting a bit drier than the other trees. It may have some reason why it's getting a little more stress during the warm months, and then it's getting that colour a little bit earlier in autumn. The other thing it could be too is Japanese maples are pretty much majority of them, 80% of the ones you see growing, and pretty much all the ones you see as street trees, are grown from seed. And when you grow any tree from seed, you get variations, and Japanese maples are highly variable from seed. It's why there are so many different cultivars of Japanese maples available. Go into the garden centres in winter when all the deciduous trees are coming in, and you can select from 20, 30, 40, 50 different varieties of Japanese maple. So you could just have a strain of Japanese maple that's come from a seed grown tree that just naturally colours up early in the season, doesn't need as much cooling and chilling hours before it sets its autumn colour. It's just the way your tree is. So have a look at the soil, see if there's any reason why your tree may be stressed. If it's not that, I say it's just a matter of that's when the tree naturally and genetically wants to colour up. Enjoy it. Jeanette Fenton this weekend is putting together some wicking beds in a new garden area. Carrots, parsnips, beetroots and onions okay to grow in wicking beds? Absolutely, Jeanette. As long as there's enough soil in that wicking bed for those root vegetables to produce their roots deep enough, they will grow absolutely perfectly well in wicking beds. And matter of fact, wicking beds are probably the biggest trend in veggie growing I'm seeing at the moment in Perth. Because we have such hot, dry summers, wicking beds are a great way to grow all your summer vegetables, and I'd imagine that would be the same case for much of Australia. Mim Simpson's got back to us again. Is any spray that will kill the Ocnus cerulata, the Mickey Mouse plant? There are, but probably the most effective one, Mim, would be the tree and blackberry poison. So that's a Yates product. You mix that with a little bit of kerosene and very carefully apply it to the trunk of the Mickey Mouse plant once you've cut it back. Be very careful that you're not soaking the soil around it. The tree and blackberry poison is very effectively taken up by the roots of the trees as well. So it is something you have to handle with a great deal of care. Unfortunately, as pretty as the Mickey Mouse plant is, in warmer parts of Australia, it is a bit of a weed species. Mel Morrow wants to know when she can start pruning fruit trees, ornamental cherry blossoms. Well, I wouldn't prune your ornamental cherry blossoms, Mel, until after it's flower. So all our ornamental and fruiting stone fruits, so your peaches, apricots, cherries, plums, whether they're ornamentals or fruiting varieties, pretty much by now have set all their flowering wood. So you can have a look at the trees, you'll be able to see the flowering wood on the trees. So if you prune them now, you'll be pruning those flowers, fruit, that future flowering wood off the tree. So you don't want to do that. Leave them till after they're finished flowering. Stone fruit, I like to prune them after the fruit finishes. So after the harvest in late summer, autumn is when I like to prune my stone fruit. Riley Sage wants to know if there's any way to make mulch without access to a mulcher for DIY mulch. Well, it depends on what you're trying to mulch up, Riley. If you're trying to mulch up small twigs and leaves and that sort of garden debris, if you've got a rotary mower, put it on the lawn and run the mower over it, and you'll get the benefits of your coarse mulch material, so your twigs and leaves and stems, and that'll get a bit of the blades of grass mixed through when the mower goes over the top of it. That's a really good way of mulching those up. Otherwise, you can do what's known as the chop and drop technique. So as you're going through the garden, you're pruning twigs and branches off shrubs and small trees, use your secateurs, chop them up as small as you can, and just let them fall onto the ground. Those pieces will break down over a period of time, return those nutrients and carbon to the soil. You can buy the electric mulching machines now. They're not overly expensive. You probably pick a decent one up for around the $100 mark. And the key with those ones is a bit of maintenance of the blades. Just keep the blades sharp and they'll last you a very long time. We've got Jet Grosner in Gooseberry Hill. When's the best time to add sheep manure to the garden, please? Well, Jet, you can add sheep manure to the garden pretty much any time of the year. Keep in mind, in summer, it will dry out and can become a little bit water repellent. So probably if you're adding it around now in autumn, mix it through in winter and early spring. I find sheep manure can be used quite effectively as mulch, but if you can blend it into the soil a little bit as well, it's a very good soil conditioner. It really adds that organic material and supports a lot of organic life in the soil, and will bring the earthworms into your garden as well. So that's great for that. Now, Jeanette Fenton in Glenorchy in Victoria wants to know, is it true to grow peas from seed instead of seedlings due to root disturbance? Is it the same for beans? Yes and no. So beans, I think, are fine from punnets. You don't tend to have too much trouble with those, but I still think they're better and easier to do from seeds. With peas, definitely. I think peas are far easier if you just sow them seeds. They germinate very quickly, so there's not a lot to be gained from buying punnets. So yeah, definitely do them from seed, and I think you'll have great results. So I think we're just about out of time. So thank you very much for all your questions. We had a lot today and some great photos as well. It's been a very enjoyable show. I've enjoyed the last 3 weeks. It's been a good challenge and something new to do. Our winner of the prize for today is Mim Simpson. So it put some fantastic questions, particularly about the banana trees. I love that question. So it's a challenge I had myself, Mim. So to claim your prize, please message us on Facebook with your email address. So make sure you hit that like button. Thank you all again for all your questions. I'm sorry if there's any we didn't get to. Trevor will be back next week. He'll be refreshed and be an absolute eager beaver to get to your questions. Remember, you can always jump on our website, catch up with the show, previous stories from other shows, and stay tuned for another episode of the Garden Gurus this weekend. Happy gardening, everyone, and thank you for having me.